Hello, welcome to another Housing Sector podcast. Can you believe it's episode 40? I know I can't. When I started this, I had, again, no idea that it would go on for as long as it has. Thank you to everyone who likes and subscribes. Please, subscribing really helps the channel. So if you could subscribe, that would be great. Today's guest is Frances. Frances, thank you very much indeed for joining us today. Would you like to give us a little bit about who you are and why housing is important to you?
Hello, and thank you for inviting me along to have a chat this morning with you. Um, it's quite interesting, isn't it, when people kind of pop up about housing and where they come from. And I suppose in a way, my housing background literally goes back to my childhood. I'm the eldest of seven, and we were born and brought up in three rooms in a terraced house on the borders of Brent and Hammersmith. And I knew from a very early age how difficult housing was. If you haven't got nice housing, you don't bring your friends home, you don't socialize, you kind of feel a bit embarrassed about where you live, especially if you go to school where people live in very comfortable, nice surroundings. So from an early age, housing was very much on my agenda. In addition to our three rooms, my bath was actually hung up on a hook out in the garden, and we had a downstairs toilet. And I'm really sad in many ways that we've kind of almost come full circle with the situation over homelessness now. I'm one of those people who, with an outside toilet, didn't usually go to the toilet outside. Not a very pleasant discussion to have with people. But we're now in a situation where we've got children living in temporary housing, sharing bathrooms and toilets, and to them, like me, having a gazunder or a chamber pot is commonplace. So housing in many ways is where I've started, and in a way where I've finished up as well. My life took me through various twists and turns to actually joining the housing department at Harrow Council, initially in improvement grants, but I ended up actually in the housing department, and as a result became very involved in public sector housing. I'm actually still a fellow of the Chartered Institute of Housing, and over my career, I've worked in public policy. I was very much involved in developing a lot of the low-cost home ownership program, and until recently, I was actually a board member of a large developing housing association who straddles Buckinghamshire and Hertfordshire. So my life has very much been around housing, looking at it from all sides. And now, recently, I was elected as a councillor, and already getting questions and queries both on the doorstep during electioneering, but more so now as a councillor, in the hope of some households and families that I can possibly help with the issues at hand for them.
You talk about it coming round full circle again, and I tend to agree with you. Where do you think we went wrong?
I think right to buy absolutely didn't help. I can understand people's aspirations. We all want to better ourselves. Wherever you start from, people want to be better than often they started from. And in many ways, people love their houses. Of course they do. They've invested their time, their effort. It's got lots of memories and thoughts. But the fact that we were letting these homes go without replacing them, and the money wasn't there to build more houses, even from what was received as the receipts, I think was really very much the nail in the coffin of social housing. If we wanted to done right to buy, my view was, well, perhaps, yes, we could have sold the properties, but we should have sold them at a more equitable cost in terms of not the discounts, but at a figure that was comfortable for people on average wages being able to buy. But at the same time, made the receipts more valuable and the potential to invest in them.
So we've lost all that financial funding, and those homes have now sort of disappeared
Yeah.
into the private market. Is there a way of, apart from rebuilding, but it doesn't seem to be the councils that are building new homes. It seems to be developers and housing associations.
Well, the model has obviously completely changed. It's the way that finance has come. I remember the early days of, I think it was the loan board, the private works money to actually be able to, or the public work loan board to actually phone houses, sorry, to finance houses. The Ministry of Housing all those years ago, very concerned about the money going out, and we've seen the move because there was a view that local councils were too big, too cumbersome, too bureaucratic. By moving them out to housing associations, not only would the housing management and the general circumstances change, but the housing associations could tap into private funding. So that actually should have meant that money could have gone further. But unfortunately, it hasn't worked because it needed to be more of a partnership. The vagaries of the market has impacted on housing associations in what they do and how they operate. And obviously, the councils themselves are being pushed and pulled in other directions in terms of where the money is to be spent. And yet, the tragedy is that good housing underpins everything. Everything we want to do on the social front is predicated on good housing, whether it's health, whether it's education, whether it's opportunities. Get your housing right, get people housed in places where they're secure, stable, comfortable, and everything flows from it. And I'm just bewildered at times that the governments of the day have failed to understand that, and that only in many instances, it's if you can afford to buy, were you sort of given that opportunity to achieve. And unfortunately, there's been a sort of an attitude on occasions, I think, that only people who could buy their homes mattered, and that's never been the case, and never should be the case.
I agree, and homes are the cornerstone of our society, and it's so important. You said there that the councils were becoming too big, too large, and there was sort of no sort of body support. They were to free reign, but housing associations now have the same problem. In my opinion, they're too big, they've got too much power, and there's no real oversight. Have I got that right, or am I on the wrong trail?
I think that there is a real danger of them becoming too big. And in fact, some of them are too big. The problem, of course, is often that they need that strength and size to be able to raise the finances that they need to invest in new homes, whether it's actually building new homes or doing work. So you have the problem that it's almost like strength in numbers, which is tragic, really, because a lot of the small associations that came after 1975 were very much about community based, and they're gradually getting swallowed up because they can't raise the finance, they can't compete in the jobs market, they can't actually deliver and hold their own in their local area. It's not all of them, but many of the ones that are able to do it are very much niche organisations. The other problem, I think, is that when you start to have these very long and tenuous lines of communication from the centre to the coalface, they break down.
Yeah.
The messages don't get there, the understanding of what's needed to be done disappears, and they do become businesses. You can look at organisations now that perhaps rather than thinking about the tenants that they've got, they're almost looking to the tenants that will come in the future. And that's not just in the properties. You look at what's happening with taking over other people's stock. We'll take that on just to rationalise it, but it doesn't necessarily mean that rationalisation is going to give a better service to the people who are there. And the same with mergers. I think the danger is that housing associations, their boards and their senior team can be so concerned with looking to the future in terms of acquisitions and mergers that they forget that they've got real people living in their own real homes that need their help and support. And that's what gets missed.
Paul Kershaw and I spoke about in a podcast, Follow the Money. We spoke about how CEOs are now finance directors. They're coming in. Finance directors are now becoming CEOs who lack that human element to be a humanistic approach. And mergers, we use the word mergers, which is quite a polite euphemism. If it's a failing or small housing provider, is it not really a hostile takeover?
Well, it just depends on what the reason for the merger is. they're not always failing. I mean, often they have their own brand and their own community loyalty, but the reality of the market, if you're a small organization and you're just covering your cost, the opportunities, say, for staff, the opportunities to develop what you want to do become less and less. So the danger is that you get people who come in with their commitment, but if they want to look, say, for career opportunities or to see that they're part of a growing organization, quite often staying that small, limited organization is not an option. I would take issue with your comment about the people at the top not caring. My experience of housing association boards and chief execs are that many of them are extremely caring people. That's where they came into it. So I wouldn't agree normally with that as being the situation. I don't think that really holds water. But I think the problem is that these organisations, from having become, started off as small local organisations, are multi-million pound businesses. And I think it's like, the old thing about, a teacher comes in to teach and then suddenly becomes a head teacher. And they're not at the coalface anymore, remembering what it's like for the kids coming in on day one or problems they have to deal with. They move further and further away from what their original ideas and perhaps you could say vocation was. So I think they get pulled and pushed in many directions because you have got the boards expecting sound financial management, meeting all the KPIs, developing new schemes, all the list of strategic and general objectives that are expected. So I think it's very difficult to keep your eye on the ball, but also in a way, because if you've come into housing because you care and want to do it, you do think that everybody else has that same view. And then you expect people to behave and respond in the same way that you do. So I think, the push and pull at the top of those organisations is very difficult.
And you're right to call me out on such a blanket term that I used. And, I'll admit when I'm wrong. And, don't take my word for it. Ask my
Yeah.
wife. I often am. But I talk as a sort of resident who sort of comes in and goes, well, actually, this isn't the sort of service. And I think there is too much distance. It's something I covered in a previous post about the multiple layers between the top
Yeah.
and as you say, the people on the coal face. And it is a vocation, and I've been told by multiple people, it's a vocation. We do this because we love it. And as residents trying to be heard, again, that doesn't quite ring true when we're raising the issues, and then there's the sort of event
Yeah.
circuit where everyone goes, "Oh, we're all listening to the voice of the residents," but
Yeah.
maybe they
Well,
can't fix it. Maybe that's the problem.
um, I think in the same way that the chief exec or the CEO is being pulled in this, that, and other direction, I think it's the same for housing officers or teams on the ground, because unless the message is very clear and there is an obvious and committed commitment to ensuring that the residents are first and foremost in the thinking, it is very easy for them to almost feel marginalized. I mean, I've had experiences where, residents have said to me, I feel as if I'm gaslit.
Mm. Yeah.
People say one thing and then, something else happens and you go, how did that happen? That's not what I said. And I mean, I've even been asked to go there just to kind of give moral support and listen to the conversation that occurred. And I've come back having then subsequently got an email and thinking, was I at that same conversation? And that's the issue where people, I think, start to find and feel that they don't quite know where they stand in terms of what's happening, whether it's the pressures to deliver, whether it's the expectations of management up the line. I do think that there are problems for housing management staff and repair staff, and it becomes very difficult because I've seen tenants become so frustrated and so angry that the backlash, the sharp tongue, and the arguments are being held with the housing officer, when in reality, some of these discussions should be held with people further up the line who are holding the purse and controlling the money flowing and the actions as well. Because people don't live in bubbles and they see things going on and say, well, why can't I have it? Why can't you do it? You did it for Mr. So and so up the road or Mrs. So and so round the corner. And now you're telling me we can't afford it, or that's not what you do. So people start to feel, hang on, there's nothing consistent here. What is the policy? Show me the policy. Explain why you're doing what you're doing. And whether that's because housing officers haven't got the time, I just wonder sometimes about attitudes as well that come not just from within organisations, but wider about, if we've always pushed this idea that home ownership is the objectives, that's where you should be going. Why are you a tenant? So there's almost an attitude there which is completely perverse. People are tenants for all sorts of reasons, public and private, and it shouldn't really matter. If you're paying for a service, then you should get that service, regardless of whether the public's paying for it through housing benefit and various benefits, or whether you're paying it yourself. And I think that's another area where we need to start thinking about attitudes in terms of delivery. But I think in the main, people want to do a good job. Nobody wants to come and have an ear bashing every time they turn up from work. They want the support to have a standard position, but at the same time feel that they've gone home, having done a good job and beneficial to somebody.
You see, I'm a big supporter of the housing officer, and I think we need more of them. And I think that should almost
Yes.
be the entry level for no matter what area of housing you're looking to get into. You should start with 3 to 6 months as a housing officer, understanding the community you're going to serve. But I also think those same housing officers should have a monthly meeting in where they talk to the senior leadership team to give them that direct connection. And if you've got a senior leadership team, they should be spending at least a month a year out in the communities. And with the mergers that happen, we lose that community presence. This is something that we've certainly felt. You lose the community presence, and housing officers they're just non-existent. I mean, they're supposedly, but we never see them. They're never around, and they've lost that connection to the communities that they're here to sort of serve in a way.
I think there's a lot of truth in what you're saying, but again, it's the pressure on them, isn't it? They're getting pressured from above, pressured from below, pressured from the side, every which way. And again, I think housing management, in so many ways, is the beacon for the housing organisation. Get your housing management right, and everything will flow from there. It's difficult to know where to come into it through, and I think you're saying about having a month here, month there. I mean, I actually think it should be more often that the CEO actually comes out and has a look around
Yeah.
their estates. I mean, I can think of estates where I live. I mean, I went out canvassing in April this year. I was out canvassing 4 years ago, and I have been in between to the same estates. There's still the same rubbish there. I mean, I
Yeah.
went to one place and there's still piles of bricks and an old cupboard that's been outside this block for 4 years. And you think, come on, people are paying for this service. It's got a private road. When did somebody last put a broom down it? No way. But somebody's paying for that service. Somebody's getting a service charge bill every year saying that this was done and that was done, and it's not. So I think very much about chief execs actually coming out and doing stuff and actually looking at the properties on a day-to-day basis, but also the way that the properties get let. I mean, I was absolutely horrified. One of the things I do as a volunteer is I'm involved with something called the Chiltern Toy Bank, and it's a Christmas pop-up. And our community comes together to donate good quality toys. So we sort of recycle, regift, repurpose them. And two issues stand out so amazing to me. This was about 3 or 4 years ago, and we went to a house, and it was a family of about 4 or 5 children. And the door opened, and Mum was there with the kids behind her, and you looked through the door, and she'd been there a while, and they hadn't got a piece of carpet on the stairs or in the hallway. And you could look through the living room, and basically there was a couple of little rugs on a bare board floor.
Yeah.
The kids were all wearing their coats. They were cold in this house, and their pinched little faces. I thought, my goodness, this is crazy. What are we doing here? And that was like, why is that happening? Why is that happening that this family is living in a house like this? And just last Christmas, I went to a block of flats, and there was a young mum there with a little baby, must have been about 15 months old. Again, she opened the door, obviously very embarrassed about where she was. You could look in. The baby was crawling on a concrete floor,
Yeah.
and you could see into her house, and it was into the flat. It was a concrete floor behind her, and then further through, she'd actually got her curtains hanging over the windows, jammed in the windows, because there was no curtain batten to put any track up. I'm thinking, why are people allowed to let properties in that state? How can you be happy and proud to invite people into your home when you're in those circumstances? The houses were cold. They were shabby, and not for the want of these people. You could see trying to do the best they can in these situations. We just shouldn't be letting properties in those conditions. I noticed, was it a couple of weeks ago, there was an article about a mum down in Brighton, on her own, working hard, got a lovely little lad trying to do things, and she turned down a property because she walked into the flat, into the property, and there was all nails in the floor where they'd pulled the carpet out.
Yeah.
How was she expected to take that flat and move in? People haven't got the money to carpet. People haven't got the skills or the support to actually do the work in these properties. We just shouldn't be letting the properties in that state. This is where the chief exec should be going out and saying, "Hang on a minute, is this really what we're doing?" There's a whole question there about very basic things we could do. I mean, what's the cost of a few sheets of lino? I know it's not ideal, but when you hear people around the country have got kids literally lying on a mattress on the floor because they can't even afford beds, how can they be expected to lie on bare boards and concrete and such like? It justifies, explanation really. And of course, when you have that situation, that properties are allowed to be in that state, and that's moving in, let alone, the leaks and the damage and things that actually happens, which are not the tenant's fault. The poor housing officer has to take the brunt of that. We haven't got the money to do this. We can't do that. A case that I've come across recently, the lady is quite severely disabled. She's waiting for tests to be carried out in a major London hospital. There was damage to the wet room floor, in her house. It took 2 months for somebody to come around and repair it. That woman needed that space to be able to have a shower every day. She'd got grown-up children who had to use that service as well. Everybody for 2 months having to have a stand-up wash at a sink. It's not good enough. It really isn't good enough. And that's when the poor housing officer, as I say, getting an ear bashing because of what is actually happening, is in a quandary. I'm being pushed by management to deliver, keep an eye on cost, perhaps not spend too much money or too much time here. And yet, on the other hand, walking into homes where people are so frustrated and anxious and stressed, again, across the piece, we're just not thinking about what actually happens. And so the poor housing officer, at the end of the day, what do? The best they can, or sometimes as little as they can, because it almost feels, I imagine, soul destroying to turn up to do that every day.
And
So
of course, the ones who really are using it as a vocation, they give up. I can't fix it. I can't do it, and I'm exhausted.
absolutely,
I'll
yeah,
go and work somewhere else. I had a similar thing in working in the care sector many years ago. You had great people that came in with great intentions, but couldn't spend the time with the people they were supposed to be caring for. It all came down to budgets and money, and they
yeah,
left and went and got jobs elsewhere. You've got kind of both. You've got both your feet in each pond here, so you understand housing, how it works, and you also understand the human cost, and you're walking around door to door on the coal face. And I think CEOs need to be made aware. I think we have carefully orchestrated roadshows where they go around and they see a very, carefully selected tenant representation.
yep,
I do think they need to be walking around meeting some of these people face to face and explaining it. The role of the housing officer what can we do to support these guys? Do they need more money? Is it more training, or do we just need to make sure that they have an audience with the higher management?
Um, all right, I think the boards and the senior executives actually need to understand what a housing officer is actually doing, um, because I don't think they're really in tune with that. And this is why I think that the chief execs need to actually just do spot checks. Come out and have a look. Come and
Yeah.
see what's going on. They on a Tuesday morning phone up and say you've got three void properties coming up. Can I come and have a look at them? You're going out on site. Can I have a look? Can I come with you to see what's actually happening? Again, it depends really, I think, on the way that the organisation, runs and operates. I've seen situations where I think, well, when did the housing officer last come out and do something? Even the letters that they send seem to imply to me that they didn't even really know what the problem was. A comment about something antisocial behaviour. Oh, you should report it to the police. And I I
Mm.
did rather sharply write back and said, well, I'm very surprised you're saying that because the police are involved, but you don't seem to appear to even know that yourself. So I was a bit
No.
curt because I kind of thought, don't tell me when you're the one who should know what's going on down there.
I've had that with complaints that I've written for people, for multiple
Yeah,
landlords,
yeah,
and the response always seems to be they'll pick on something that, oh, well, we're focused on, and then completely ignore paragraphs of complaints
yeah,
that are just as valid.
yeah.
Um, yeah, I sometimes think it's just a massive knot, and I don't even know we begin untangling it. We have had
Yeah,
previous podcasts where I've spoken about furniture poverty. And there's a
yeah,
great charity, End Furniture Poverty, and they seem to have all their ducks lined up. So if you're a housing association and you've got a tenant that needs beds and furniture, they can sort of fund it and support it and get it in within sort of 3 or 4 weeks. And I've also had a podcast about the lack of flooring, carpets and such. And that seems to stem from an old procedure where it had to be ripped out. So regardless of the quality of this
yeah,
carpet, it had to be ripped out due to
yeah.
some anti
Why?
health and safety laws. So
No,
there's
why is it health and safety? I mean, to be honest, my view is if it looks like good quality and somebody said to you well, we've only had it down a year, it must be cheaper to somebody to go around with a carpet cleaner and clean all the carpets than the cost of t ripping it all up and taking it away. I've got told, oh well, the tenant might not want it. Well, actually,
let it be
ask
their
them.
choice. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, before you do it. I mean that the whole attitude of we don't want to give it, it'll be our responsibility. It's not it doesn't have to be your responsibility. Right on the bottom of the tenancy agreement, this property was let with carpets, which the housing association will not be replacing in due course. But we don't even need to be in that situation. As I said, okay, a lino's not brilliant, but I mean, it's better to have a piece of lino down over the whole floor, which at least is clean and manageable, than nothing. I mean, all new properties, for example, should be built or fitted with the vinyl planks. Looks very nice. It's easy to keep clean. Okay, it might be a little bit more expensive, but it gives you a 25-year guarantee. It's not rocket science. And just to give people at least the dignity, because you can have as much furniture if you want, but if you can't afford to put a piece of carpet down, because let's be fair, it's not just a piece of carpet. You've got the underlay, you've got the gripper rod, you've got somebody to come and do it properly. It's a lot of money, and people actually haven't got the money to do it. It's to me, it just seems so basic. It's such a basic thing that we should be putting into into properties. Um, it doesn't make sense.
I was a carpet cleaner. Another one of my past experiences. I was a carpet cleaner, and I got in with estate agents, and they would, if you had a property that you bought to let, you got the carpets cleaned after every tenant went. So I would go around there every sort of six
Oh,
months or 12 months and clean those carpets for the next
yeah,
guys to go in.
absolutely. It's absolutely. And the other thing that also cracks me up on this is that, if you were as a private landlord, you could no more let that property without a piece of
Yeah,
carpet and generally than fly to the moon tomorrow. So
yeah.
why the housing associations expect that somebody who is generally impoverished, often on their own or have limited skills or opportunity to do things, can move into a house that needs so much work that needs to be done? Again, I worked for a leading housing association, and 20 years ago, we actually had a void inspection report. And when people went, very much like, the checkout when you leave a private rented property, this is what we expect you to do. This is what needs to be done. Of course, not everybody can or will do it, and you have midnight flits and all sorts of things, and you can't. But it should be accepted as a sort of two-way deal that you have the property, we'll look after it for you, we'll maintain it, and when you go, you leave it in a good condition. And so you say to people, this is what we expect it to be. You know, even if you can't do the repairs that are needed, there's nothing to stop you leaving it in a clean and tidy condition. And to me, it's almost on one level we have expectations that people are able to do all these things, but on the other hand, we treat people as being infantilized by where they're at. I mean, perhaps I'm being unrealistic, but if you were leaving a private rented property, many people have been through the private rented sector, so they know what's expected. We kind of like don't say to people, "This is what we expect of you as your side of the bargain." So,
Absolutely. No, I agree, and I think you're talking a lot of sense. My wife always says, we're not asking for the moon on a stick or
no,
gold-plated unicorns. This she did. Okay, look, we're coming to an end. It's great talking to you. Coming to an end. If you had a message for people who experience bad housing,
yeah.
and a message for CEOs who may be unaware that they're providing bad housing, what would that message be?
I think for people who are in bad housing, it's often very difficult to even lift your head up and see what's out there to be able to be your own advocate. I think people who come across it need to be an advocate for those people and say and ask, do those people want the help to be supported to make this argument? And that's what my role, I think, now being a councillor is going to be. I'm not taking any old flannel. I'm not prepared just to sit back and let this drift along. And again, if people say something, that's what they mean. I've had, again, somebody had this person had a mobility issue. She's asked for a query about something outside. She's told them 3 times she doesn't want a handrail. And the first email I get back from the housing officer after
Hmm.
meeting them for the first time, oh, this is a picture of where we're putting the handrail. I've had to write back in the first sentence is, can we just get something clear? The tenant does not want a handrail outside her house. That is off the table. I shouldn't have to do that. So first of all, you've got to listen to people. You've got to support them. I think the other thing is that chief execs in their busy diary need to find some time just to go out. If they're in an area that is not 5 minutes from the office, but further afield, say, right, let's have a look at a map. Where's our nearest estate? Let me go round and have a look. Let's walk around. Let's see what's happening. Is it neat and tidy? Is it being run as it should be? Because I mean, I've been there myself. As a board member, you get to be shown, the newest and the brightest and the tidiest. You don't actually get taken to the worst estate because who wants to show off their dirty laundry, physically and metaphorically? So that's what I think it is. I think the trouble is time is a precious commodity, and for a lot of people, you delegate it to other people to deal with the problems rather than necessarily taking it to yourself and saying, let me go and see for myself and see that all is well.
Yeah. There's the title for the podcast. Francis, it's been lovely talking to you. It really has. I hope you'll come back.
I'll do my best.
Look, keep up the great work. You're
Thank
making
you.
some great effort, and you talk a lot of sense. So thank you very much indeed. Thank you for coming on today.
Okay, then. Thank you. Bye bye.